You have seen the picture 100 times. A wooden boat bobbing on the Sea of Galilee. Sun-beaten men hauling dripping nets over the side. Jesus, sitting in the stern, or standing on the shore, roasting breakfast over an open fire. Fish and fishermen are everywhere in the Gospels. We are so used to this imagery that we rarely stop to ask why. If you ask most people why Jesus chose fishermen as his closest friends, they will give you a practical answer. They were ordinary. They were blue-collar workers. They were tough, reliable, and humble. They made good metaphors. That sounds reasonable. It is not. It is entirely too small. In the biblical imagination, details are rarely just practical. They are theological. And to understand why Jesus is constantly stepping into boats, commanding nets, and holding fish in his hands, we have to look past the first century. We have to look back to the beginning. To the ancient mind, the sea was not a beautiful place for a vacation. It was the abyss. It was the realm of chaos, darkness, and death. It was the untamed wild. Ancient cultures surrounding Israel believed the sea was a god of destruction, a monster that had to be fought and subdued. But the Bible opens with a very different story. In Genesis chapter 1, the sea is not a rival god. It is just water, and God's Spirit is hovering over the face of the deep. He speaks, and the chaotic waters are separated. He brings order out of the abyss. He creates dry land, but the sea remains a boundary. It represents the unmanageable forces of the world. It is the place where human beings cannot breathe, cannot stand, and cannot survive. And on the fifth day, God fills it. Genesis chapter 1, verse 21 says that God created the great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters swarm. Notice what is happening. God does not eliminate the deep. He populates it. He fills the dark, churning chaos with life. But this life is completely out of human control. An ancient Israelite farmer could fence in a sheep. He could yoke an ox. He could manage the animals of the field. But he could not manage the creatures of the deep. Fish, in the biblical pattern, belong to the realm of chaos. They live out of sight, beneath the waves, moving in the dark. To an ancient reader, pulling a fish out of the water was not just a way to get dinner. It was pulling a piece of life out of the realm of death. It was a momentary victory over the untamed deep. The sea is chaos. The fish are the life hidden within the chaos. And the fisherman is the one who stands on the boundary between the land and the abyss, dropping his net into the dark. This changes the way we read the Gospels. When Jesus walks onto the shore of Galilee, he is not just looking for a few good men to help him start a religious movement. He is stepping into an ancient, cosmic pattern. Every time fish appear in the biblical story, they are not random props. They are markers. They track God's authority over the deep. They show us who is truly in control of the chaos. And this pattern does not start with the disciples. It starts much earlier. To understand why Jesus chose fishermen, and why fish keep showing up in his hands, we first have to understand how the ancient prophets viewed the monsters of the water. When you read the Old Testament, the sea is almost always a battlefield. The prophets and poets of Israel did not look at the ocean and see a serene ecosystem. They saw a dark, churning rebellion. And lurking within that rebellion were the greatest symbols of danger in the ancient imagination, the monsters of the deep. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 21, the text says God created the great sea creatures. The Hebrew word used there is tananim. It is a word that can be translated as sea monsters, serpents, or dragons. It is a heavy, terrifying word. In the myths of the surrounding ancient nations, these creatures were rival gods. They were cosmic enemies that had to be defeated in violent, heavenly wars, just so the physical world could be made. To the ancient mind, the sea was an enemy, and the monsters were its army. But the biblical author does something brilliant and subversive. Genesis simply says, God created them. They are not rival gods. They are not a threat to the divine throne. They are just creatures. God speaks, and they exist. He blesses them, and tells them to multiply. Not a cosmic war. A simple command. Not a rival power. A created subject. This establishes a theological baseline for the rest of Scripture. God has absolute, uncontested authority over the darkest, most chaotic spaces in the universe. But the biblical poets still use these creatures as symbols of ultimate human helplessness. Because, while God can manage them, we cannot. In Psalm 74, the writer is crying out to God in a time of national destruction. The temple is in ruins. The world feels like it is collapsing, and to remind God of his ancient power, the poet points to the water. He writes that God divided the sea by his strength and broke the heads of the sea monsters in the waters. He says, God crushed the heads of Leviathan. This is not a biology lesson. It is a profound declaration of sovereignty. The sea is the ultimate chaos, and Leviathan is the king of that chaos. The poet is saying that if God can crush the monsters of the deep, he can certainly handle the political chaos on the land. We see the same tension in Job chapter 41. God speaks to Job out of the whirlwind to remind him of the vast limits of human understanding. And God asks Job if he can draw out Leviathan with a fish hook. Can he put a rope in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? The answer, of course, is no. No human can tame the deep. No human can draw out the monsters of the sea and make them a pet. God is describing the ultimate, uncatchable fish. The sea creatures represent a realm completely beyond human management. They are wild. They are dangerous. They are the untamed edge of creation. When an ancient Israelite read about the creatures of the deep, they felt a shiver of terror. These were the beasts that swallowed ships. They were the shadows that moved beneath the storms. To survive the sea, you needed a god who could conquer the sea. The pattern is firmly set. The water is chaos, and the creatures within it are the agents of the abyss. For centuries, this is how the imagery functions in the minds of God's people. The sea is where you drown, and the great fish is the thing you fear. Most people assume this imagery is just ancient poetry, a dramatic metaphor disconnected from the rest of the biblical story. But this is exactly where the pattern takes its first major turn. God does not just conquer the dangers of the deep. In one of the most famous stories in Scripture, he uses one of those terrifying creatures to do something entirely unexpected. If you ask someone to summarize the story of Jonah, they will usually give you the same sequence. A prophet runs away from God. He gets on a boat. God sends a terrible storm to stop him. The prophet is thrown overboard, and as a punishment, God sends a whale to swallow him. It is a famous story. But the way we usually tell it misses the profound theological work the text is doing. First, the biblical text never calls it a whale. The Hebrew phrase is simply a great fish. But more importantly, the fish is not the punishment. The fish is the rescue. To see this, you have to look at what is happening in the water. When Jonah is thrown overboard, he is surrendering to the abyss. He expects to die. In Jonah chapter 2, he describes the terrifying reality of sinking into the deep. He says the waters closed in over his life. The abyss surrounded him. Seaweed was wrapped around his head. He went down to the roots of the mountains, to a place where the bars of the earth closed upon him forever. He is drowning in the chaos. The sea is acting exactly like the ancient enemy it was always understood to be. It is consuming human life. But then, the text gives us a single, quiet detail. It says, "The Lord appointed a great fish to swallow Jonah." We often read this as a horror story. Being swallowed by a sea creature is the ultimate ancient nightmare. But the narrative is actually a story of terrifying grace. God takes the great symbol of untamed danger, the monster of the deep, and turns it into an ark. The fish does not swallow the prophet to consume him. It swallows him to protect him from the crushing weight of the sea. God's authority over the water is so absolute that he does not even have to destroy the monster to save his prophet. He simply commands it. He drafts the creature of the abyss into his own rescue operation. The beast that is supposed to bring death becomes a submarine of life. While Jonah is in the belly of the fish, he prays. And he says something fascinating. He says, "Out of the belly of Sheol I cried." Sheol is the Hebrew word for the realm of the dead, the grave. Jonah knows exactly where he is. He is sitting in a living tomb. He is locked in the dark for 3 days and 3 nights. He is suspended in the belly of a creature that belongs to the chaos. But he is breathing. The chaos has not won. God has placed a boundary around his prophet, right in the middle of the deep. And after 3 days, God speaks to the fish. The text says, the fish vomits Jonah out onto dry land. Look at what the pattern has done. The sea threatened to destroy. A creature of the deep arrived. But instead of a tragic death, there is a miraculous return to the land of the living. The ancient trope of the sea monster has been completely inverted. The abyss was forced to give back the life it tried to swallow. Jonah is swallowed and spat out alive, establishing a strange, dark symbol of rescue. A sign that sits dormant for centuries, until a carpenter from Nazareth brings it back to life. In Matthew chapter 12, the religious leaders come to Jesus with a simple demand. They want a sign. They want proof of his authority. They are expecting something cosmic. Fire from heaven, a voice from the clouds, or a display of military strength to drive out the Romans. Jesus refuses. He tells them no sign will be given, except one, the sign of the prophet Jonah. He says, "For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." The Greek word Matthew uses in this passage is ketos. It is not the ordinary word for a fish you would catch in a small lake. It is a heavy, ancient word. It means a sea monster, a creature of the abyss. This is a jarring response. Out of all the glorious miracles in the Hebrew scriptures, the parting of the Red Sea, the manna in the wilderness, the walls of Jericho falling, Jesus chooses the darkest, strangest story of them all. He chooses the monster of the deep. Why? Because he is explicitly connecting himself to the ancient pattern of the abyss. Remember what the sea represents. Chaos, death, the untamed wild that consumes human life. By choosing the sign of Jonah, Jesus is telling his audience exactly what is going to happen to him. He is not going to bypass the chaos. He is going to let it swallow him. When Jesus says he will be in the heart of the earth, he is using the language of the deep. In the ancient biblical imagination, the chaotic waters and the grave were intimately connected. They were both the realm of the dead. They were the places where light and breath were extinguished. He is pointing toward the cross and the tomb as his descent into the abyss. The grave is the belly of the fish. It is the dark place that threatens to lock its bars behind him forever. But the sign of Jonah is not just a story about being swallowed. It is a story about being spat out. It is a story about the absolute authority of God over the chaos. Jesus is claiming that the monster of death will consume him, but it will not be able to hold him. The abyss will be forced to give him back. The tomb will act as an ark, holding him in the dark until the appointed moment of resurrection. Not a final defeat, a rescue. Not the end of the story, the ultimate victory over the deep. The sign of Jonah is the proof that the God of Israel does not just manage the chaos from a safe distance. He enters it. He lets the waters close over his head, and then he bursts the abyss open from the inside. Jesus takes the ancient symbol of human terror, the monster of the sea, and turns it into the primary metaphor for his own resurrection. He reclaims the water. But here is what most people miss. When Jesus steps onto the shores of Galilee to begin his ministry, he already knows the sign of Jonah. He already knows he is going into the deep, and he knows he needs a specific group of men to carry this message to the world. So he walks down to the water's edge. He looks past the scholars in Jerusalem, the priests in the temple, and the politicians in the palaces. He goes to the men who make their living, dropping nets into the darkness. But Jesus does not just use the fish as a metaphor for his own death. He uses it to redefine the lives of the men he calls to follow him. When Jesus calls his first disciples, he uses one of the most famous phrases in the entire Bible. He looks at Simon, Peter, and Andrew, who are casting a net into the Sea of Galilee, and he says, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." We read this in Mark chapter 1, verse 17. And because these men are literal fishermen, we usually assume Jesus is just being clever. We think he is taking their everyday job and turning it into an accessible spiritual metaphor. That sounds nice. But it is entirely too small. Jesus is not making a pun. He is making a prophetic declaration. To the ancient Jewish ear, the phrase "fishers of men" was not a new invention. It was a direct reference to the prophets. Specifically, it was a callback to a heavy promise made centuries earlier. In Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 16, God is speaking about the coming exile. The people of Israel have rebelled, and God warns that they are going to be scattered among the surrounding nations. In the biblical imagination, the Gentile nations are often described as the sea. They are the roaring, churning, chaotic waters that surround the promised land. To be sent into exile is to be thrown into the abyss. It is to be swallowed by the chaos. But God makes a promise. He says that the exile will not be the end of the story. He says, "Behold, I am sending for many fishers, declares the Lord, and they shall catch them." Notice what the imagery is doing. The sea is the chaotic world of the nations. The fish are the scattered people, lost in the deep. And the fishermen are the agents of God, sent into the dark to pull the people back into the light. The Old Covenant revealed the need. Christ brings the fulfillment. When Jesus stands on the shore and tells these men he will make them fishers of men, he is not giving them a simple evangelism strategy. He is announcing that the long exile is finally over. The time has come to gather the scattered people. The great rescue operation from the abyss has officially begun. The imagery appeared first in one place, then moved into another, and now the same truth is becoming harder to miss. The pattern is completely intentional. Jesus chooses fishermen because his mission is to reach into the dark, churning chaos of the broken world and pull humanity out of death. The disciples are not just starting a movement. They are being commissioned to stand on the edge of the abyss, drop the net of the kingdom into the deep, and drag life back to the shore. Not a new religion, a rescue mission, not a clever metaphor, the completion of the ancient promise. But saying this with words is one thing. Demonstrating it is another. To pull humanity out of the abyss, the disciples are going to need more than just a new title. They are going to need a demonstration of absolute authority over the water. They need to know that the deep will actually surrender its catch when the Master speaks. This calling was so massive it required a miracle to prove it was real. A miracle that Jesus performs not once, but twice, with one crucial difference. In the Gospels, there are two major moments where Jesus commands a miraculous catch of fish. One happens at the very beginning of his ministry. The other happens at the very end. In Luke chapter 5, Jesus is teaching from Simon Peter's boat. The disciples have been working the water all night and have caught absolutely nothing. The sea has yielded nothing but exhaustion. Jesus tells Peter to push out further and let down the nets into the deep. Peter hesitates. He is a professional fisherman, and Jesus is a carpenter, but he obeys. What happens next is completely chaotic. The text says they enclose such a massive number of fish that their nets begin to tear. They signal frantically to their partners for help. They fill both boats so full that they begin to sink under the weight. The haul is spectacular, but the system holding it is breaking apart. Peter falls down at Jesus' knees and says, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man." Peter recognizes the authority. The abyss has surrendered its life to the voice of the Master. But the human vessels, the nets, the boats, the fishermen themselves are overwhelmed. They are not yet ready to contain the catch. Now fast forward to the end of the story. In John chapter 21, Jesus has been crucified. The tomb is empty. The disciples have retreated back to the Sea of Galilee, unsure of what to do next. They get back into the boat. They do the only thing they know how to do. They go fishing in the dark. And just like the first time, they spend the whole night casting their nets and catch nothing. Then, a man stands on the shore in the early morning light. He tells them to cast the net on the right side of the boat. They do, and suddenly they cannot even haul it in because of the staggering quantity of fish. John chapter 21, verse 11, gives us a hyper-specific detail. Simon Peter hauls the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. For centuries, readers have tried to mathematically decode that exact number. Some connect it to ancient geometry. Many early Christian writers argued it represented every known species of fish in the world at that time, symbolizing every nation on earth being gathered in. That is a beautiful thought. But the most important detail in the verse is not the number. It is the sentence that comes immediately after it. The text says, "And although there were so many, the net was not torn." Pause for a second and look at the movement. In Luke chapter 5, before the cross, the net breaks. In John chapter 21, after the empty tomb, the net holds. What changed? The resurrection. Between the first catch and the second catch, Jesus went into the belly of the earth. He let the chaos of the deep swallow him, and he came out alive. The new creation has begun. Because of the resurrection, the great ingathering of the nations is now secure. The net that will draw humanity out of the abyss will no longer tear. The community Jesus is building is finally strong enough to hold the vast, chaotic, overwhelming weight of the people who are about to be pulled from the dark. Not a breaking system, an unbreakable promise. The net finally holds. But there is one more vital detail about fish in the Gospels. And it happens when Jesus is trying to prove to his closest friends that he is not just a spirit or a ghost. In Luke chapter 24, the disciples are hiding behind locked doors. They are traumatized. The man they followed for 3 years has been executed. Suddenly, Jesus stands in the middle of the room. The text says they are startled and frightened, and they think they are seeing a spirit. To an ancient Jewish mind, a ghost belongs to the realm of the dead. If Jesus is just a spirit, then the abyss has still won. Death has still claimed his physical body. The chaos of the deep has kept its prize. Jesus knows exactly what they are thinking. He tells them to look at his hands and his feet. He tells them to touch him, but they are still overwhelmed, hovering somewhere between terror and impossible joy. So Jesus asks a simple question. He says, "Have you anything here to eat?" They hand him a piece of broiled fish. He takes it, and he eats it right in front of them. We usually read this as a purely biological proof. A ghost does not have a digestive system. A spirit cannot chew and swallow. By eating the food, Jesus proves he is physically, bodily, alive. That is true. But look closer at what he is eating. He is not eating bread. He is not eating lamb. He is eating fish. If you step back and look at the whole biblical pattern, this is one of the most triumphant moments in Scripture. For centuries, the sea was the terrifying abyss. The fish were the wild, untamed creatures of the deep. The monster of the water was the symbol of death that swallowed the prophet. The deep tried to swallow Jesus. The tomb closed its dark mouth over him, but he did not stay in the belly of the earth. He burst open the gates of the abyss, and now, standing in the upper room, he asks for a creature of the deep. He takes it in his scarred hands, and he consumes it. The chaos did not swallow the king. The king has swallowed the chaos. The great symbol of the abyss has been reduced to a simple meal. Death has been so thoroughly defeated that its ancient, terrifying shadow is now just food. And this is exactly the image we see in John chapter 21. After the miraculous catch of 153 fish, the disciples haul the unbroken net to the shore. The sun is just starting to rise, and Jesus is waiting for them. He does not appear as a terrifying conqueror holding a sword. He is crouching in the sand, tending a small charcoal fire. The text says, "There is already fish laid out on the coals, and bread." Jesus tells them to bring some of the fish they have just caught, and then he says, "Come and have breakfast." Think about the ancient Israelites shivering in fear at the monsters of the deep. Think about Job being asked if he could ever put a hook in the jaw of Leviathan. Think about Jonah crying out from the dark, crushing belly of the sea. Now look at the shore of Galilee. The sea is quiet. The wild, untamed deep has been completely subdued. The great cosmic tension against the chaotic waters does not end with a bloody battle. It ends with the resurrected God of the universe cooking fish over a morning campfire for his friends. Not a roaring monster, a quiet morning, not a threat to human life, a demonstration of human restoration. The chaos has been tamed into communion. Jesus eats the fish, and the chaos of the deep is finally conquered. Which brings us to the final vision of the water, where the pattern reaches its ultimate completion. If the story of the water ended on the beach in John chapter 21, it would be a beautiful ending. But the biblical pattern has one final movement, and it resolves the ancient tension once and for all. In Revelation chapter 21, verse 1, John is looking at the final restoration of the world. He writes, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more." For modern readers, this sounds tragic. We love the ocean. We build our houses next to it. But to the ancient mind, this was the ultimate comfort. John is not talking about the destruction of saltwater ecosystems. He is talking about the end of the abyss, the realm of chaos, the deep that swallows ships, the untamed danger that separates nations and consumes human life. It is completely gone. The beast of the deep has been eradicated. The ancient enemy is dead. But this does not mean the new creation is a desert, because while the sea is gone, the water remains. It has just been transformed. The prophet Ezekiel saw this exact transformation centuries earlier. In Ezekiel chapter 47, he receives a vision of the restored world. But there is no chaotic sea. Instead, there is a river flowing directly out of the sanctuary. This river flows down into the wilderness, toward the lowest, deadest place on earth, the Dead Sea, a body of water so hostile that no living creature can survive in it. It is a barren, lifeless abyss. But Ezekiel chapter 47, verses 8 through 10, describes a miracle. When the river from the presence of God hits the stagnant, dead water, it becomes fresh. The text says that wherever the river goes, everything will live. And then, Ezekiel gives us a detail that pulls the entire biblical pattern together. He writes that fishermen will stand along the shore. They will cast their nets, and the fish will be of many kinds, as countless as the fish of the great sea. Pause and look at what has happened to the pattern. In Genesis, the fish were hidden in the unmanageable darkness of the chaotic deep. In Jonah, the great fish was a terrifying, shadowy instrument of rescue. In the Gospels, the nets were breaking under the weight of a broken world being pulled to safety. But here, at the end of the story, the fish are no longer hidden in the abyss. They are swimming in the river of life. The chaos has been entirely removed, but the life that was pulled out of the deep remains. They are gathered, healed, and thriving. The fishermen are no longer dragging nets through the dark of night on a violent sea. They are standing in the light of the new creation, watching the water teem with absolute abundance. The waters of death have been swallowed by the river of life. If this journey has helped you see the brilliant, careful design of Scripture, consider subscribing so we can continue uncovering these patterns together. The fish in the biblical story were never just background details. They were the story of humanity, pulled from the jaws of the chaos and carried safely home.